This is Contestants Not Appearing on Stage, a weekly podcast for game show enthusiasts. Episode number 14, Taboo. Recorded March 5th, 2016. Alright, welcome back everybody to another episode of Contestants Not Appearing on Stage. My name is Torgo and I have my voice back. Life is complete. Jordan especially is happy about that. Thank you for joining us again, and let's see who my co-hosts are this week.
Hi, I am Jordan, aka Unique Perspective, and when this is done, I'm going to count some sheep.
I am Jason, aka JJMan920, and when this is done, I'm probably going to go play more Price is Right Decades.
And I'm Nick, and wrong line. And I'm Randy, aka Punchboard91, and I just got a job at insert company name here.
Read the teleprompter correctly.
And I'm Nick, and the four-letter word, the clue is, he sounded a bit fishy.
Okay.
I didn't know this was interactive. Call in now at 555.
Leave a comment and solve the riddle. We're going to start off with, unfortunately, what seems to be a serious topic about The Price is Right. And interestingly, one that you can't find that many sources on. JJ found this story about 3 days ago. Some of you recall former model Brandy Sherwood from The Price is Right. I don't remember what her married name is, unfortunately.
Cochran.
Brandy Cochran, that's right. Model on the show for several years. Became pregnant during the Drew era. And eventually, she took maternity leave. And Fremantle eventually said, you know what? We're not going to have you back on the show for whatever reason. She filed a lawsuit in 2010, and she ended up winning said lawsuit in the latter half of 2012, and I have the amount. She won, allegedly, $775,000. That amount bumped up to $8.5 million to include punitive damages afterwards. So we're talking a pretty hefty chunk of change. However, 4 or 5 months after that, they took away her winnings. All of them. Took them away. Because the court was like, you know what? We didn't go about this right. We need to rehear the case due to a Supreme Court decision. A state Supreme Court decision. Basically, a whole bunch of red tape. And earlier this week, the Hollywood Patch reported that the retrial was settled out of court, and Brandy just received, again, the $8.5 million in punitive damages. The reason I bring this up, first of all, people don't seem to be talking about this. We only found one news outlet that even reported this story in the first place. So obviously you have to, take it with a grain of salt. It's either not very widespread or somebody got misinformation along the line. But we're going to bring it up anyway because it's important regarding The Price is Right and we care about the models and the staff and whatnot. The other reason I bring this up is, do you think that Brandy's alleged success with this lawsuit will, let's say, enable other models that have left the show for various reasons? Because as we know, The Price is Right and their models kind of have some dubious relations regarding why they left the show. Do you think that will open up the floodgates for more lawsuits that are going to be headed Fremantle's way?
Well, I guess to answer your second question, I kind of am not so sure about this because from the switch to Bob to Drew, we've had, I feel like it's been relatively less models leaving the show, and particularly with the Mike Richards switch. And in fact, I think the only model I can think about who left during the Richards era was Lanisha, and I don't even remember why she left. So, but I feel like it's sort of a different era with the way the models have been treated from the Bob era to the Drew era, and because I think the reasons might be different, and I don't know if post Brandy there has been a reason for someone to potentially file a lawsuit.
Diane comes to mind.
Oh, well, I'm talking about, I was talking about the models kind of post Drew, kind of anyone who left during the Drew era. Diane left way before the Drew era.
This is true.
I'm talking about more like I said, Lanisha leaving and maybe like Shane and Gabby, but even then, I don't know if that was just downsizing.
Well, first off, Lanisha, when she left, she wagered claims against the show about being mistreated, about being yelled at, having comments sexually made about her, kind of in the same way that Holly left. And I think she tried to file suit, but it didn't go anywhere. So I'm not entirely sure how truthful the claims are. But Lanisha seemingly left on bad terms from the show, which was probably the first time someone had done so since Barker had left. Since the Brandy stuff was still kind of going on at the time. I think the Brandy stuff has helped the show, and it's particularly helped the current models, because since the lawsuit has occurred, both Rachel and Gwen have had children, and that's pretty big, and they both come back. I think it helped them be able to have more confidence in knowing that their job will probably still be there once they come back from maternity leave.
It looks like, because George said we really haven't had too many during the Mike time, which is true, but we've had a lot at the very beginning of Mike's time. At the beginning, I think it was season 37. It looks like there's like 3 or 4 different ones that left right about then. So to his point, I think a little bit of that might have been downsizing, maybe to get back to the whole, like, family aspect, that way, okay, there's not like, 10 different models in rotation. But I mean, it is interesting that right when Mike did take over, that there was, a lot of models that were leaving about then.
We could posit the theory that that's right around the time where they started miking the models as well and having them do more, because with social media kind of swinging in full force around that point, I feel like people at home were getting to know the models as personalities and as real people rather than attractive women that stood next to prizes, because they could follow the models on Twitter. You could hear their voices and get a sense of their personality. I think this is right around the time where the models actually had a little bit of say in the outfits that they wore. They didn't all wear the same dress or a minor variation thereof. They wear pretty substantially different outfits most days on the show now. So I think that might have something to do with it. Maybe there was a pay raise involved when they started miking the models more and having them do a little bit more, make them feel more like full-fledged, I don't want to say cast members, but like members of the Price is Right family. And maybe that was the intention. They wanted to raise their rates and have, as Randy said, more of a core group of 4 models, and they had to let some go.
When you think about the beginning of the Mike era, remember the person that's Mike Richards is not mentioned, at least in that Hollywood Patch article, as the person who told Brandy, we don't need you anymore. Because since Mike was brand new coming in to the show, he didn't do everything like he might do now. He had help from Fingers Greco. So she also might have been part of the push to perhaps downsize the models more so than Mike, because she had, 30 years experience at the time when she was really placed in the high position of the show once Roger was fired. So she might have had a little bit of something to do with that as well.
And Greco leaving the show, actually, I think, is probably the first example that I can think of where they really gave the departure of a member of the staff a whole bunch of fanfare. I remember it was during season 39 because that was during George's trial run as an announcer, which they had during season 39 when they debuted Pay the Rent and he lost all that weight and stuff. Because I remember George was the one who got to do that. And then lo and behold, he gets to be the announcer. But, that's another story. And the Brandy stuff all happened before that. So do you think that, and afterwards, when Scott Robinson left the show, he got a tearful farewell from Drew. So they've really made an effort, especially on screen, to show respect to a lot of the different cast and crew members. Do you think that that is a result of the Brandy lawsuit, or do you think that's them? You think it's them like saying, "Look, we care about our staff," or do you think it's them kind of cover their tracks a little bit, trying to save face with the press and the media?
I don't think one thing alone can change an attitude. I think it's possible the Brandy lawsuit could have been a trigger or a spark, but attitudes don't change overnight. And as you said, I think it took a couple of years after this lawsuit to sort of get the vibe going. So my theory, and I can't say I know for sure, I've never worked at Price is Right, I don't know the atmosphere.
You don't say!
True, yes, but my theory is that this could have been a spark that someone could have looked at this and say, hey, maybe we should start treating people with respect more, and going from there and starting to make the changes until the family vibe felt real. Again, just a theory. I don't know for sure.
I think it was perhaps partially trying to save face, but I think also, Brandy, was on the show for a while. I mean, I guess I suppose Scott was probably, a same kind of veteran like Brandy in terms of time on the show.
Brandy was the longest tenured model when she got pregnant, right?
So
at that point,
she might have been.
I'm not sure if it was her or Rachel.
We can look at them. We can look in the moment, but I think definitely with Greco getting a send off. I mean, you kind of have to give a send off to not only the producer who, worked well with Drew, but also the producer who probably showed Mike the ropes when he got there. You got to give her a send off. So I think regardless of whether or not this lawsuit had happened or not, Greco was still going to get a showcase dedicated, and a show technically dedicated to her.
This is also true. Do you think that might have something to do with how some of the fans reacted to the departure of Roger Dobkowitz?
I mean,
because I'm gonna open the can of worms. Let's do it. Let's go there.
I mean, maybe, but Greco wasn't as loved, I don't think, as Roger. Roger was the clear connecting point to a lot of the fans, while Greco wasn't really. So,
well, when you say a lot of the fans, is it really a lot of the fans that connected with Roger?
When I say a lot of the fans, I mean a lot of the fans who will be online at a lot of fans like us. That's what I mean when I say a lot of the fans.
All right, but I don't think you decide to give someone a showcase, give someone basically a show because of the opinions of 100 people.
No, I'm not saying that they did that because of the opinions of the 100 people. No, I'm saying she got the show because she worked there for 30 years, 35 years, 36 years, whatever. She worked there for so long. She helped train the current host and current executive producer. That's why she got the show and the showcase. But Torgo was talking about, did she get that because she was more loved, because of the show was reacting to how what happened to the fans after Roger was fired. I don't think that. I'm just saying the fans reacted the way they did to Roger because, again, a lot, if you go online at game shows, Roger was the reason.
And I think a lot of people blame the EP of the show for stuff that they're not even in control of. Even to this day, look at people. How many people blame Mike Richards when a certain game is set up on the more difficult side? Even though I'm pretty sure Richards has nothing to do with how the games are actually set up. He's busy trying to produce the show and make a quality product. He has someone else do the game setups.
But at the same time, it's kind of like the same way people blame Harry Friedman on Wheel of Fortune for Win the Puzzles because he has full approval of it. So Mike obviously lets it go through, so therefore they can blame him because he could have put a stop to it if he wanted.
I feel like it's just sort of a psychological scapegoat syndrome where people always want to blame something. Blame something or blame someone that they need a reason that something's changed.
That's true. And when I say about game examples about being set up difficultly, I'll just segue into this next topic real quick. The game that seems to come up more often than not, especially this season, is Lucky 7. Lucky 7, if you don't know, first of all, welcome to The Price is Right. Glad to see you watching it for the first time. Secondly, Lucky 7 is the game where there's 5 giant numbers on a wall. That's the price of a car. They reveal the first one. You have 7 $1 bills in your hand. You have to correctly predict each digit in the price of the car. For every digit that you're off, you have to give the host $1. You need $1 at the end of the game in order to quote-unquote buy the car. So you can miss all 4 of those digits by a total of 6, one way or the other. A lot of times in the earlier seasons when they had like special cars like a Corvette or something expensive, a lot of the times they would have a lot of the setups where you could guess 5 every single time and win. The setup that comes to my mind is, I think it was on one of Bob's last shows, they had a car there. The price was $45,675. So guessing all 5s in Lucky 7 would generate a win. However, this season, you see a lot of 1s and 9s, 2s and 8s in prices in Lucky 7 cars. Do you think that this makes the game unwatchable after repeated instances of that, or do you think it's a necessary evil where some games this season have gotten easier, That's Too Much is a little more lenient and has actually garnered quite a few wins, and something has to be difficult every season, and it's just Lucky 7's quote-unquote turn?
Does something have to be difficult every season, every plane?
You can't have everything be easy all the time, or otherwise the budget would spiral out of control.
Oh, I don't disagree with that, but I feel like what you're saying is that every game or a game should be hard every plane for a season. And I think unless the game is naturally difficult anyway, like Pay the Rent, I don't think it needs to be hard every time. I don't think you can always set it up for a win. I agree with you. But I don't think you have to make the game hard every time. I just think for whatever reason, this is sort of their new normal with Lucky 7. I don't know if they set it up this way to make it harder to win a car to control their budget, but I mean, I feel like it's more circumstantial driven rather than this idea of, oh, we have to make one game hard every single time it's played.
And see, on that point, I feel like, what's the point of having, why not just spread out the evil, per se, as you would say, between games, have Lucky 7 maybe won 4 times versus 0, and have a different game Stack the Deck maybe won 4 times instead of 8. Like, why, I'm not, obviously Stack the Deck isn't usually won 8 times, but just, why make one game a season when you could just spread it out over different games and have some games, that way every game at least gets, a couple wins per season. We don't have this mentality of, here's Lucky 7, insta-loss coming.
Do you also feel like that might have to do with the prices of the cars, and that's what they're, as I say that 5 times in a row, that's what they're trying to set up as the new norm? And what I mean by that is, like I said, there was 45, 6, 75. So in theory, all 5s will win. Prices of cars now are usually what, 18, 19, 20, and 21,000 on the show. So guessing a 5 right out the gate means you're automatically going to lose $3 for the most part.
But
so do you feel like they're going to set up like, well, if you're playing Lucky 7, yes, you should guess extremes now. And I mean, and that's what they're trying to set up as the winning strategy.
But I disagree with that, because if the first number is a 1, you know that the second number is not going to be a 2 or a 1 or something. You know it's going to be high, 7, 8, 9. So, maybe not all contestants, but okay, it's not going to be a $12,000 car. On the same boat, if the first number is a 2, you're not going to necessarily think it's an 8 or a 9. I mean, yes, they do have, $29,000 cars, but for the general area, if the first number is 2, then you go low, and then the rest, I feel like, should be more down the middle. I just feel like because every playing has a 9 in it somewhere, I feel like that's just kind of, why does there have to be a 9 in every car price in Lucky 7?
I mean, and to this point about it being the new norm, almost sorts, I thought about this as well and how it could be true, but even then, there's only so much that you can predict with this being the new normal. Like, let's say you're playing the game and you recognize that there's a lot of extreme numbers, and let's say you say that the 4th number is a 2, but it ends up being a 9. Right idea, wrong way. So I don't really know if you can anticipate so much of it being the new norm, because there's so many little patterns they can manipulate with something like a Lucky 7 setup.
The one option I feel like that really attributes to that, and I'm not blaming the show, is paint and fabric protection, which every option, usually you can go online afterwards on like the Nissan website or the Ford website or what have you. You can construct the vehicle that they have offered on the show with the options that they give, and you can either get the price exactly right or be off by like scant amounts, $10, $15. Paint and fabric protection is never offered because that is usually an option provided by the dealership, not from the manufacturer. So there's no way for any contestants, unless you work at a car dealership, to really know for sure how much paint and fabric protection is, especially because it differs based on even the model of the car. No 2 Nissan's models have the same paint and fabric protection cost.
The thing with Lucky 7 is it's, same as some other games, like Range Game comes to mind especially, is inflation has not been kind to it, because, we give the first number for free. Well, that was an obvious it's either 1 or 2. Maybe it's not completely obvious, but you would only miss $1 on it. I feel like it's not as easy as it was because the prices have gone up as it was back in the 70s, 5,000, 6,000. If you said 6 for the first number, you could easily tell whether the next one's going to be a 1 or a 9.
I think that
And,
might have been
you
just
only-
homeostasis and not making the game difficult by having the contestant guess 5 numbers as opposed to 4.
Yeah, but at the same time, the first 2 numbers were pretty easy back then, whereas now the third digit, we don't know if it's going to be a 1 or a 9 because the hundreds doesn't mean as much as it used to back in the 70s when, 7,200 versus 7,900, there was a considerable difference, whereas now 15,200 versus 15,900, a normal contestant can't tell the difference between that.
That's true. That's a good
And I
point.
mean, and to your point about paint fabric protection, they've been including that stuff for years, though, back in the dog days. So I don't feel like they're just suddenly now using painted fabric protection just to manipulate a setup, because they've been doing that quite a bit before Drew Carey anyway.
If that wasn't the case, then why do we see the same car with different options every time?
Yeah, I mean, option manipulation I get. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I feel like it's not a Drew thing. I feel like that even Roger Dobkowitz has manipulated the options too.
Oh, I'm
to
sure.
make it
I just
fun.
feel like it's more obvious now for some reason. Maybe it's just because I'm older and I guess I pay attention to that more.
I mean, I wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, like, I would agree with you. I guess I just wouldn't. I guess I felt like you were saying it was exclusive, and I don't think it's been exclusive to this era by any means.
Real quick before we move on to a little bit of Jeopardy talk, we did have a special that we kind of weren't expecting this week. Back on Monday, February 29th of 2016, Leap Day. Is there an official name for February 29th? Leap Year Day, Leap Day?
I think
I
it was
think
called
it's
Leap Day.
Leap Day.
The show made mention of it, but I don't think we were expecting the extent to which they were going to go with it. And that's too much, having all of the 10 prices on the board end in 229. In cover-up, having the price of the car $22,916 to
I thought it was Money
$29,616. Oh, Money Game. I'm sorry. When you watch the show that often, sometimes details like that get lost in the
Well-
fray, especially when you don't write them down. The point is, they had a price of a car be the date, the air date of the show.
And see, I didn't even notice when they had the show that it was, what was it, 22,916. I didn't even realize that I got the right answer, because typically in Money Game, the correct answer to the last 2 is going to be the lowest number. Usually that's where the El Cheapo, the whatever they call it, 05, typically they like to do that because contestants don't think it. But what I found interesting is 16 is so close to 22 that a contestant could have picked 16, and they've done it before where they think it's the first 2. Oh, there's the back 2, so then it produces a win easier like that.
But the
Well-
fact that they had a 22,916 car on the 22916 show, that could not have been a coincidence.
Oh, it wasn't a coincidence at all. I 100% believe that. I didn't notice it, and I don't think Drew made mention of it in that
He
game.
didn't. We kind of
I
thought
feel-
about it afterwards.
I feel like this is the second time they've made almost a mini special out of it, because I wouldn't call what they did on Groundhog Day the same extent, but there were certainly a couple things at Groundhog Day that they threw in with what was it, the showcase copy having a certain repetitiveness, and I wonder if this is a trend we're going to be seeing more, but I like what they did with Leap Day. I like the setups. I like the little extra cash game they put in. That was fun, and they did a fun little subtle thing with Plinko where there was all sort of Leap Day themed prizes. I think it was a frog humidifier,
A jump starter kit.
jump starter kit. So I'm enjoying little things like that. And
I like that. It's a nice response because a lot of the time, we mentioned in a prior episode that one of the complaints we had with the specials is that there's just too dang many specials, and a lot of the times they feel underwhelming because they start off really strong with the theme of the special and then they just kind of taper off. I think interjecting intermittently in an episode, be like, hey, it's leap year, so we're going to do this for this game. I think that's a better way to go about it. It's still kind of playing and toying with the holiday, what day the show's going to air, without having all the hubbub and making it a full-blown special. I think having nice little nods to it
Yeah,
is a nice solution.
if they had started the show off and Rachel and Amber, I don't even know who was the models, pop out and they're dressed as frogs and they're leaping, then I feel like that would have been a bit too much. Now I can't get that image out of my head. But at the same time,
That's a model lawsuit waiting to happen, Randy.
I like that segue. But at the same time, we're not going to have this special every year. In fact, I just looked it up. February 29th, 2020 is on a Saturday. So we're not going to have it again in 4 years from now. So this is, a one-time special. This isn't like, okay, we're going to see it every year on Leap Day. They're going to try have something new. This is, a one-time thing. I'm completely fine with it.
I mean, I think the way that I view it, and I think the way that I think it should be viewed is, I don't view it as a special. I view it as fun little Easter eggs. And, hey, fun little Easter egg here and there, fine by me, just as long as it's not overkill. Just as long as it's just little moments like they did with this and Groundhog Day, and I'll be good with it.
I like it.
And the thing with That's Too Much is, I don't think we mentioned yet, that the prices all ended in 229 and went up by 1,000 each time. And
Which made for the smallest ranges in That's Too Much that we've ever seen, because usually it's like 1,200, 1,300 for each one. But if I remember correctly, the actual retail price of the car, it wasn't like the last three digits weren't less than 229. It was like over 229 if memory serves. So in a way, it was just like, is this car $22,000? Is it $23,000? Is it $24,000? So in a way, it kind of made it easier for the contestant to wrap their head around the price.
And because, my question is, do you think that was easier because you knew the prices that were coming next? Because at first I didn't know if they were going to jump up by 1,000 or 2,000, but it was obvious they were going 1,000 each time. Do you think that made it easier because you knew the next prices that were coming? So pretty much you knew, okay, if I know the price of the car, I know when to stop. Like,
I mean, statistically, if you look at pure numbers, mathematically, I'm sure someone would say that it's more difficult because it's smaller ranges. But if you're the average contestant can't price a car past like the thousands digit, as you mentioned with Lucky 7. So I feel like if they know what it's going to be, they can kind of play ahead because they know, like you said, what all 10 are going to be. So I feel like I don't think that's easier for the contestants to win doing that, but I think it's easier for the contestants to play the game.
The only thing I wonder about that is the way That's Too Much does their setups now with like a range of like $1,200 to $15 prices separated. I feel like people may not think they have to be as specific. And with it being exactly $1,000 gaps, do you think that would make the contestants think it's harder because they feel they have to be specific?
Half the contestants don't even know what the rules of the game are that they're playing while they're playing it. So I thought it was pretty clear. I think Drew explained it very well that that's what they were going to do. He's like, all the prices are going to end in 229, 18,000, 19,000, 20,000. So I think that, say what you will about Drew's hosting style, but the fact that he does hammer some points home, I think he does it just to make sure the contestant knows what's going on to give them the fairest chance at winning. So I think that he explained it well enough where it wasn't a detriment to the ability for the contestant to win the car. I don't think the contestant ended up winning that game.
No.
But still.
On that note, I mean, just as far as Drew goes, like, I do appreciate him doing that and pay the rent. He specifically says outright, you're not trying to put them in order from least expensive to most expensive. He specifically says that line. He's like, no, that's not what you're trying to do. You need to make it so. And granted, I was wondering, like, well, maybe the producers don't want him to tell the contestants that, but at the same time, pay the rent is barely one. You look, contestants always still put the least expensive in there, even when Drew outright says it. So the producer's probably like, go ahead. That way we're not looking like we're trying to be deceitful necessarily.
I'm not sure about that because I went to 2 tapings at the end of 2014. Cover Up was played on one of them. And once the contestant lost Cover Up. And then right afterwards, Drew goes to the audience and is like, okay, everybody, here's how I would play Cover Up. I would just completely blow the first digit or two on the price of the car. The cover-up strategy is something that a lot of the fans have known about for quite some time. You try and blow the first digit, which is usually, you can tell the difference between like a $10,000 car and a $30,000 car, so you know what the correct one's going to be right away. And whatever you luck into for the latter digits, then you automatically get a free turn to try and figure those out because you can just place that easy first digit. So I think that a lot of it is the show probably wants contestants to win, or at least to have enough understanding of the game where they know what they're doing. And if they want to have different strategies to win, that's perfectly fine.
Well, I guess the question is that what will it take to get people to listen to Drew's advice? Because take a look at Randy's example with Pay the Rent. I feel like most stages I've seen who pay the rent hear that, but then they still try to put the cheapest in the mailbox, or they listen to the audience's advice, which is the cheapest in the mailbox.
But they may not know that that's the cheapest item. They may be genuinely trying the strategy of not putting the cheapest item in the mailbox and just not know which is the cheapest item. There's no way to tell because we can't read minds.
No, I mean, I know we can't read minds, but I mean, I feel like I could be wrong, but I feel like I pick up on a certain enthusiasm when they say the product, like they know it goes there. Again, I could be wrong. It's just something that I thought I picked up in a few Pay the Rent plays.
But there are some obvious items, like that's how It's in the Bag is set up. Like the first two bags are set up. The first one is generally the cheapest. The second one is generally the most expensive. There are some obvious items that you know are the cheapest and you know are the most expensive. And I feel like most contestants can pick out the cheapest one just because, usually it's like 99 cents or something like that. So I feel like most contestants still are just putting it in there because I think it is least to most.
You could also make the argument that maybe they're not trying for a tricky $100,000. Maybe they're aiming for the easy 10 grand.
I think I just kind of feel like you're giving some of the contestants too much credit. Like I feel like most contestants aren't doing that. I feel like they're like, yeah, we're going to win $100,000.
If anyone here watching this has ever played Pay the Rent, leave your thought process below.
Way to have an esoteric audience, Jordan. You better be catering to only, 30 people?
And then let me reach out to you, because I don't want Jordan reaching out to you because I'm afraid. So I will reach out to you. My name's Randy. I work at insert company name here, so I will contact you.
You're just gloating about the fact that you just got a new job.
Well, I technically don't have it yet. I quit my other job and have an interview on Wednesday. But,
Yeah, I hear you. Before we head out, though, again, a lot of talk about price and a lot of stuff that we can obviously have comments on. Let's talk about Jeopardy for a little bit. Online in the past couple weeks, something we wanted to talk about last time, but we ran out of time. Unfortunately, and it kind of goes in tandem with how the models were treated on price, a lot of people have been harassing female Jeopardy contestants online because of some of them based on their looks, some of them based on personality quirks that they have. I know Jordan had mentioned before we started recording, one of the contestants had the tendency to have upward inflections at the end of all her answers and sentences, trying to beat the clock because she was behind, so just trying to cut off Alex because she knew that she was pressed for time, so just trying to get as many clues as possible. And a lot of people just saying some really mean, spiteful things about contestants, about female contestants online. I feel like a lot of game shows have that happen with both sexes, but I feel like people are just, in general, meaner towards women. It's more readily apparent. More people notice it. You get a lot more comments on it when it's a female contestant for whatever reason. Do you think that that's something that's always been there, or do you think that's something that's more prevalent in recent seasons?
See, but I disagree with your comment because you take Arthur Chu, who had the habit of cutting off Alex and whatnot too, and that got a lot of flack on Twitter. I think the whole reason that it's blowing up is just because social media. Like, you take things that any game show, like stuff that goes viral now, wouldn't have 10 years ago because social media isn't what it is now. So I feel like, I personally don't think it's just because they're females. I think if a male had done the same thing, that they would have been getting the same kind of comments on Twitter.
From what I understand, and I haven't necessarily read every single comment, not that I would, sure, but the way that I understand it is that people like Arthur Chu and Matt Jackson, I thought when they were heckled more for their personality, their social quirks, whereas I feel like some of these contestants who have been recently harassed, I thought that the comments towards them felt a little more personal. Again, I can't say I remember from memory exactly what was said, but that's the sense that I got, and that's what I sort of felt was the difference.
Well, I feel like a lot of that has to do with the fact that Jeopardy does a good job of not casting based on what a contestant looks like.
Yeah.
And they do it purely on ability of gameplay and personality, how well that person may... I mean, they don't care about a certain type of personality, but you need to make sure... I mean, there's got to be something about you that resonates that can actually be captured on camera. You can't just be a quiet hermit the whole time. You need to be at least some sense of outgoing. But Jeopardy's always been... I guess it's one of the purer game shows because it truly feels like it's a slice of the population of the country on stage, 3 people. It could be people that you live next door to. With some of these other shows, it feels like only pretty people get on. You don't see it so much on the big ones that have been around for forever, but a lot of the newer shows like GSN stuff and whatnot. A lot of the like, how often do you see an ugly contestant on Game Show Network? It's rare. It really is. How often do you see a family on Family Feud where all the contestants have like skin conditions? It doesn't happen because I feel like those shows are a little... I don't want to say that those shows are more... You know what I'm talking about though, right? I feel like with Jeopardy, since they care more about the gameplay, I feel like people watching at home, since they see them more as an average person, I guess they feel like it's easier for them to pick apart any flaws that they may perceive that contestant has. If that makes any sort of sense.
It does, and I do feel like, to Randy's point, there's something about the picking apart of this on the social media age. I feel like if there were any controversial contestants way back in the day, back in the 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s, I haven't heard of such heckling. So I feel like there's always been something about the social media age where people feel like they can be more upfront for some reason, and I'm not sure what that is.
I think it's because it's more easy for anyone to find out that someone has that opinion. 20, 30 years ago, if you see a bunch of people in a bar just watching a game show, you guarantee that someone would be like, oh, that person's dumb. How do they not know this answer? I know that answer. Why don't they know it? But unless you're in that bar, you don't know what that person said. Now there's a written record on social media where if you say something, it's there forever unless you delete it. So someone may have that opinion, but a lot more people have access to that opinion.
Two things. One, can you say forever again, Torgo?
Forever.
And secondly, I mean, I just think of the point that, you made the comment, if this had happened in the 80s, well, I'm pretty sure it did. Jordan, I think you know Jeopardy a little bit more than I do, but they had the contestant, I think it was Barbara Lowe was her name, that kept interrupting Alex. And there's no, video of this or anything because I think the episodes weren't able to be repeated because they got so much flack, but Jeopardy said that they got, written letters and whatnot complaining about her antics. So there were this hubbub going around, but it was just in the time there was no social media. So the angry fans, whatever you want to say, back in the 80s, just wrote letters to Jeopardy and said, hey, we don't like this contestant. Well, there's nothing Jeopardy can do. They have her as a contestant, and
right, but
I mean, there's nothing Jeopardy can do. Sorry, this is where, they can talk to the contestant and say, hey, don't do this. But by the time the episode's aired, she's done. So what's...
But the difference being is that I feel like that is a collection of private opinions as opposed to a display of opinions that people have chosen to make public. I cannot recall something until the social media era as much of a public display of something they don't like about a contestant. Private letter to Jeopardy? Sure, but never anything I've ever seen in a public setting that is popular on a website pretty consistently.
So do you think it's more okay that the contestants do it, the fans do it in private, where they sent letters to Jeopardy where nobody else sees it, whereas public, they can cause hurt feelings to the contestants because the contestants can see what they're saying? Do you feel like that's worse then?
I mean, I don't know if it's better or worse, but if it's public, people will know your opinion. If it's private, the only people off the top of your head will know that it's your opinion is someone who sees the letter. I mean, technically, you're allowed to think what you think, but with the social media, there's a lot more risk of it becoming public.
Not only that, but I feel like some people may exaggerate their feelings on something when on social media because they want people to notice what they're saying to get attention. So I feel like some of the vitriol that someone may have toward a contestant, they may stretch it a little bit and throw in some more colorful language just to try and bait other people to, if not necessarily agree with them, to at least pay attention to what they're saying. We could continue on that, but before we wrap this up, I do want to mention one more thing about Jeopardy that's worth talking about, at least in brief. That Jeopardy recently announced that they are no longer going to allow Canadians to be contestants on the show.
I mean, I would say for this season, I don't know if it's a permanent ban, but I think what it is that for this online Jeopardy test, they're not allowing people from Canada. I don't know if it's temporary or permanent, but at least right now.
I think it's temporary to the point of they don't know it's TBA when they're going to change that. So it's not necessarily for the season. It's just, it could change tomorrow. But I think the question with it is, why are they doing it? Like,
I mean,
Jeopardy,
have there really been that many contestants from Canada on the show where it's been an issue, like quote unquote issue? I think that I don't watch Jeopardy nearly as much as most people do, but I feel like whenever I see it, it's usually 3 contestants from the States.
Well, there was a contestant on Jeopardy this week. I don't remember what the category was because she was from Canada, and then Alex made the comment of, well, maybe you were at a disadvantage because you live in Canada, and must have been a United States clue. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, Joe.
Yeah, it was a U.S. Final Jeopardy about the Pilgrims settling in Virginia or something like that.
But how is that any different than if the category had been Canadian geography? Then the U.S. contestants are at a disadvantage.
Look how many times they have the opera category, which is almost universally a European thing, mostly Italy.
I thought you were going to say universally something nobody knows anything about, because I sure don't. But
I mean, I do. But I mean, back to the Canada switch. That's something I do wonder about. I mean, I would say most U.S. game shows only allow U.S. residents to be contestants. So it's not like this is something unprecedented. This is something a lot of game shows do. But the question is, why the switch?
And why now?
Could it be something with Sony? Is it some kind of rehashing of the issues from the hack they had 2 or 3 years ago?
Well, I guess the follow-up question would be, what's the status with Canadians being allowed on Wheel of Fortune? Are they?
I don't see. I'm not sure because I don't think I ever hear Pat mention their hometown from Canada, so I feel like they must not be. But I've never seen anything in the rules that say you can't. But I don't study the rules that much.
Off the top of my head, I can't remember the last time we've had a Canadian contestant on Wheel of Fortune.
So maybe it's something that they applied to both shows, but we just hear more about it on Jeopardy. I feel like Jeopardy draws more of like a cynical eye from online fans than Wheel of Fortune does. Wheel of Fortune people are just like, it's Wheel of Fortune, it is what it is. Jeopardy people are generally pretty critical of because it has 61 clues every episode, as opposed to, if you're lucky, 8-9 puzzles on an episode of Wheel of Fortune. There's a lot more content that you have to sift through.
Do you think that's in part because Jeopardy is considered the quote-unquote smart show?
I think it has something to do with that, so I think that it has a higher standard that people think it has to adhere to.
Just a quick note, I just went on Wheel's website and looked at the contestant application form. There's nothing that says you can't be, but the city and state are required for you to fill out, and I'm not sure how you would fill that out if you live in Canada. So maybe there must be a thing, then I guess you're not allowed if you're in Canada.
Well, I wonder how long that's been that way. Maybe they switched them both at the same time. I don't know. If you know, let us know.
What would have been interesting, because, contestants are allowed as long as they are, is if there'd been a Canada contestant going on Jeopardy when they switched it, like as the champion or whatnot. And then they're like, but I think what it is I think they're just not accepting anymore. So I feel like even if you'd been on the show, because we're seeing some now that are already taped, and I think they said if you were in the pool, you were still eligible. It's just you couldn't apply. But I still don't understand. The question is why. I think Jeopardy or Sony Pictures released a statement saying it had something to do with like the law or something going on in Canada, but some Canadians have responded, no, there's nothing to do with that. So,
because I'm sure all Canadians are experts on game show taxes and how it's probably a tax issue, honestly, and how they have to write it off for the government, like how Sony has to.
If you have any commentary on this, leave a comment.
Yeah, and again, if you have anything you want to say, let us know in the comments section below. But that's pretty much going to wrap things up for this episode of CNAOS or CNAOS or CNAOS or however you pronounce it. Do any of you three have something you want to add before we go ahead and end the episode?
I have a question.
Shoot.
Do we get to find out Nick's answer, or is that like next week, or how do we find out the answer to this puzzle at the beginning?
It was Tuna, as in Charlie Tuna, who passed away earlier this week.
So your punchline is a celebrity death. Classy.
That might be the most awkward segue we've had into an in memoriam ever.
Well, we did have. Oh, I don't know if that
It
made
was
it
a
air or
Scrabble
not.
reference. What do you want me to do?
I don't know if it made it to air or not. But when
turn it into
Torgo was
an
like,
in memoriam.
you know who's not here? Jim Perry.
Aw.
That ended up in a blooper reel.
Oh.
So it's
Yeah.
there.
I guess the one other serious one I would want to throw in is that the other thing interesting with Jeopardy is that they just recently announced they are taping in Washington, D.C. again for, I think it's the Teen Tournament, Teachers Tournament, and Power Players Week, which is returning for the first time. And this is the first game show that's traveled in a couple of years. Wheel of Fortune has, and I think it's interesting to see like how rarely shows travel anymore. Jeopardy only doing it once every 4 years. Wheel not really traveling as much. And I don't want to go into it now because I think we could talk about it another time. But seeing Jeopardy just made me think about that.
So for the Power Players episode, we're going to see Hillary versus Bernie versus Trump, right?
Pretty much.
Well, if that goes like the Wolf Blitzer episode of Jeopardy went, I'd watch it.
So nobody's going to finish at the top of...
Well, Randy, except with $200, $400, $600, it's 200, 400, 600 delegates.
Ooh, this is how we're deciding the presidential thing. Now we're going to get a bunch of angry hate mail. Like, you mentioned Trump, you mentioned Hillary, you mentioned Bernie. Oh, boy. Just remember, if you have any hate mail to send to me, my name is Road Geek Adam, and...
And with that, we will see you next time for another episode of Contestants Not Appearing on Stage. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Contestants Not Appearing on Stage, part of the Torgo Entertainment Network. For more episodes of Contestants Not Appearing on Stage, check us out on YouTube or online at cnaoscast.net.